The algae came back every week. That was the thing nobody mentioned when I started at Bayfield Marina. You scraped the slips on Monday, and by Friday they were green again. Not a little green. Aggressively, personally green. The kind of green that made tourists stop and point like they'd found something. I'd been doing it for about 2 years by then. 2 years of scraping dock slips, pumping fuel, coiling lines, helping guys in Patagonia vests back their trailers into the water. It was a good job. I mean that genuinely. Nobody expected anything from me except showing up and doing the physical stuff, and I was always good at the physical stuff. I'd spent most of my 20s getting good at it in places that weren't Wisconsin. The tourists liked to talk. That was fine. They'd ask about charter boats and fishing reports and whether the water was too cold to kayak, and I'd answer in as few words as I could manage. And they'd walk away thinking I was just a quiet dock hand who liked the lake, which was mostly accurate. The part they missed was the flare gun in my tool bag. I kept it between a folding knife and a waterproof flashlight, under a coil of spare dock line, not standard Marina equipment. Obviously, I'd just never felt right without something in reach. And a flare gun was legal, and it was loud, and if you aimed it right, it was something else entirely. I'd had it since I left the Army 6 years earlier, and I carried it every single day without really thinking about it anymore. That's me. The other thing I kept hidden was the Ranger tab, not the actual patch. A tattoo of it, just the arc outline in black, inked under my left sleeve about 3 inches above the wrist. I wore the hoodie over it year-round. Even in July, when it got warm enough that tourists showed up in swimsuits, I had a long-sleeved flannel under the hoodie with the cuffs down. Bayfield runs cold enough that nobody looked twice. I needed nobody looking twice. The whole point of the Marina job was that nobody noticed anything about me. That I was just the guy scraping algae. That the part of me that had run clearance operations in Kunar province was somewhere far underwater. Quiet, done. The routine was good for that. Monday algae, Tuesday fuel inventory, Wednesday haul the dock carts up the ramp because the tide gauge was reading weird again. It worked most of the time. I didn't think about what it meant that I needed it to work. Lunch break was usually around noon. I'd walk the half-mile up toward the Red Cliff Reservation on County Road J and stop at Avery York's place, which she called a bait shop, but was really just her house with a cooler of minnows and a hand-lettered sign out front. She'd have coffee ready. I don't know how she always knew I was coming. She just always had coffee ready. Avery was 62, maybe older. Long, silver-streaked braid she kept tossing over her shoulder when she talked. Dark eyes with deep lines at the corners. The kind of face that had been outside in every season for decades and had made peace with it. She moved slow and deliberate, like she had all the time in the world and knew something you didn't. She sold night crawlers and she talked. That was the whole arrangement. I'd bring her something. Usually a gas station pastry because I'm not imaginative. And she'd hand me coffee and talk for about 40 minutes, and then I'd walk back. Her stories were always about the lake. Not the lake like ice-out dates and walleye migration. The lake like something was living under it and had opinions. She'd talk about the Mishbiju. She explained it once, and I've been mispronouncing it ever since. This old water creature. Big, horned, bad-tempered in a very specific way. She described stretches of the shoreline that fishermen went around without explaining why. Not because of rocks or current, but because of something else. Offerings left on shore. What happened to people who took them? The caves have been hungry lately, she said to me once. About a week before everything started, we were in the folding chairs she kept beside the minnow cooler, and she said it the same way she'd mention a road closure or an incoming front. Which caves? I said. Mainland ones, near Myers Beach. She had both hands around her mug. Something's restless. I said something like, huh, and ate my Danish. That's not me being dismissive. I liked Avery's stories. There was something in them that felt genuinely old, and she told them straight. Not like she was performing anything. But I also figured every large cold lake in North America had versions of these stories. creatures in the deep, things that hated fire. Old warnings shaped around something that happened so long ago the original event was gone and only the shape of it remained. I told myself that every time I walked back to the marina. I was wrong about that, but I didn't find out until later. Sutherland showed up on a Tuesday. I was at the fuel pumps around 4 in the afternoon. Overcast, the lake flat and gray. I was running the hose out to a 32-foot bayliner belonging to a guy named Hendricks who was always about 2 minutes from telling me a long story I didn't need. So I was working fast. Footsteps on the dock behind me. I turned around. 6'2", barrel-chested, dark hair going gray at the temples. The specific kind of face that's been in hard sun for 20 years and doesn't apologize for it. Polo shirt, khakis, light jacket that hung wrong on his left side where the shoulder holster was sitting. I clocked all of that in maybe 2 seconds, and then I knew exactly who it was. Colin Sutherland, my former platoon sergeant. I hadn't seen him since I got out. "Wayne," he said, like he'd been expecting me, not the other way around. I put the fuel nozzle back on the pump. "Sutherland." He smiled. Practiced smile. The kind that meant he'd already decided what was going to happen and was just being polite about the preamble. He came and stood next to me, hands in his jacket pockets, looking out at the water like he was just a guy enjoying the view. "Nice out here," he said. "Quiet." "Yeah, you look good." I didn't say anything to that. He let a moment pass. I kept my eyes on the bayliner and tracked Hendricks disappearing into the cabin. Sutherland glanced down at my arm, at the cuff of my hoodie where the flannel showed underneath, and then back at the water. He'd seen the edge of the tab outline. I was pretty sure that was how he'd found me in the first place. He started talking about a woman named Christina Alvarez, 26 years old, ran an outdoor adventure channel out of Duluth. Nature stuff, kayaking, that kind of content. She had a decent following, he said, which I understood to mean her disappearing would be noticed. She'd gone out near the mainland sea caves in Apostle Island's National Lakeshore about 5 days earlier and hadn't come back. Her father, Jonathan Alvarez, worked at 3M out of Maplewood. Senior executive, Sutherland said, without specifying what that meant exactly. Jonathan Alvarez wanted his daughter found without a news cycle. No Park Service search teams dragging the shoreline on camera. No press vans, just a quiet recovery. Quiet, meaning what exactly? I said. Meaning handled. He said he was running it through Pinkerton now. That was where he'd landed after leaving the service, apparently. He had part of a team put together but needed someone with specific skills, someone comfortable moving in low light, someone who knew water. I looked at him. He looked back at me with those pale blue eyes that always seemed to be running numbers. "No," I said. He nodded slowly, like that was expected, reached into his jacket pocket. I thought it was his phone. I was already half turned, hands loose at my sides, reading the geometry of the dock in case I needed it. It wasn't a phone. It was a pen injector. The fat marker kind, spring-loaded. He was faster than I'd given him credit for and caught me in the side of the neck before I'd moved more than a few inches. I felt it right away. Not pain. Warmth. Then my legs stopped cooperating. I grabbed the fuel pump housing and it slowed me down maybe 2 seconds. "Easy," Sutherland said. He caught my arm. Matter of fact about it, like this was a normal Tuesday for him, which it probably was. I went down to one knee, then both. The dock board smelled like diesel and wet wood. I was still awake, but my hands weren't listening to me. Sutherland crouched down next to me. Not rushed. He said, "You're going to wake up in Minneapolis. There'll be a briefing packet. You already have the job, Wayne. This was just scheduling." The lake was flat and gray. Hendricks was still in his cabin. Then there was nothing. The St. Paul Hotel has these heavy curtains with blackout lining. I know this because the first thing I noticed when I came around was how dark the room was, even though it wasn't actually dark out. The second thing I noticed was my wrists. Zip ties, black ones, the thick kind from a hardware store, tied to the chair arms, which were upholstered in something that felt like velvet. Fancy chair, fancy restraint situation. That was pretty much a preview of how everything was going to go. My neck was stiff where the injector had caught me. My mouth tasted like old pennies and whatever they'd used to keep me under the extra hours. The room was cold, not uncomfortable cold, just hotel AC running because nobody had thought to adjust it. A floor lamp in the corner was doing most of the work. The curtains were pulled almost shut except for a gap maybe 4 inches wide. And street light came through that gap and made a stripe across the carpet. Sutherland was standing by the window, arms crossed. He'd changed out of his dock clothes into a pressed button-down, which felt like a calculated choice. He was watching the stripe of light like it owed him something. Someone else was on the couch near the TV, older guy, 60 or so. Dress shirt open at the collar, dark slacks, rimless glasses that probably cost more than my truck. He was holding a phone in both hands and watching something on the screen with the volume turned down. His face didn't move much while he watched. I looked at my wrists again. The ties weren't going anywhere without a blade or a hard edge. "Morning," Sutherland said without turning around. I didn't say anything. "You were out about 11 hours. We drove up last night, came back this morning." He finally turned. "You're at the St. Paul Hotel, downtown, room 417. I looked at the man on the couch. "Jonathan Alvarez," Sutherland said. "Father of Christina Alvarez. He's the client." Alvarez looked up from the phone, light blue eyes behind the glasses. He nodded at me, very slightly, the way people do in conference rooms when they're acknowledging someone 3 levels below them. "Mr. Tran." I looked back at my wrists. Sutherland crossed the room and pulled a folding knife from his pocket. He cut the left tie first, then the right. Folded the knife, put it away, stepped back to give me room. I rubbed my wrists and stood slowly. My legs were fine. Whatever he'd used had cleared. Alvarez held up the phone. On the screen was a vertical video, the kind you get from a phone propped on a kayak deck bag or a rock ledge. A woman in a PFD vest and quick-dry shorts, paddling through a narrow rock passage. Auburn hair. She was talking to the camera in a fast, practiced way, pointing at the cave walls, narrating. Her voice was clear and a little breathless. She looked like someone who was good at this and knew it. Then the feed cut. Alvarez lowered the phone. He didn't say anything. Just set it face up on his knee like he was still thinking about it. "Christina Alvarez," Sutherland said. 26, Outdoor Adventure Channel. She was kayaking the mainland sea caves in Apostle Islands National Lakeshore 9 days ago. Last stream location puts her inside the cave system somewhere. No body recovered, no ransom contact initially. He paused. "Contact came 3 days ago." I asked what kind of contact. "Verbal, through an intermediary. Someone wants money. They want it quiet." He pulled a chair from the small desk and sat on it backwards. "Jonathan doesn't want this in the news. No Park Service search teams dragging the shoreline on camera. No press vans." I looked at Alvarez. He was still looking at the phone. "We want her back," Alvarez said. His voice was even, boardroom even. "Quickly, without complications." "Complications meaning reporters," I said. He didn't deny it. I looked at Sutherland. "You could have called me. You would have said no. I'm saying no now." He leaned his forearms on the chair back. $1 million, flat fee. Retrieve her, keep it quiet, walk away. I thought about that for maybe 2 seconds. No. Alvarez shifted on the couch. Sutherland didn't blink. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, set it on the desk, slid it toward me without standing up. I didn't move. "Kandahar," he said. 2012, the thing with the vehicle checkpoint. That was all he said. He knew that was all he needed to say. I stood there and looked at the piece of paper. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to read it to know what it probably said. The investigation had gone quiet because enough people wanted it quiet. But quiet wasn't the same as gone. Charges that get shelved can get unshelved. That's just paperwork and someone making a phone call. The AC hummed. The stripe of light on the carpet hadn't moved. "Okay," I said. Sutherland nodded once. "Okay." That was the whole negotiation. 45 seconds maybe, 3 days of my life, gone. He had the team mostly assembled already, which meant he'd been planning this whether I said yes or not. I was probably always the last piece. That bugged me a little, but I filed it and moved on. He laid it out over coffee in the hotel room. Actual decent coffee, room service, silver pot on a tray. Alvarez had moved to stand by the window by then, looking down at the street with his hands in his pockets. I don't think he was interested in the logistics. Gail Morris, 32, Hennepin County EMS paramedic. Sutherland pulled up a photo on his tablet and I recognized her immediately. She'd been our field medic for 2 deployments. She was the reason at least 3 people in our platoon still had all their fingers. She was also one of the most aggressively direct people I'd ever served with, which made me feel slightly better about the situation. Slightly. "She agreed to this?" I said. "She agreed when she heard you were leading it." I didn't know what to do with that, so I moved on. Zane Burns, 38, commercial diver out of Duluth. He was bringing his own tanks, a dry suit, and a sonar fish finder. Sutherland said he'd done salvage work on Superior for 6 years and knew the rock formations around the Apostles. His photo showed a big guy with reddish blonde hair and a wide, flat face and a faded anchor tattoo on his right forearm. He looked solid. He looked like someone who showed up and did the thing without needing to talk about it first. Lewis Dennis, 24, University of Minnesota, geology grad student. He'd done his thesis fieldwork on the Apostle Islands shoreline formations, been inside parts of the cave system twice. His photo showed a thin kid in a University of Minnesota hoodie with wireframe glasses pushed up his nose, squinting a little at whoever was taking the picture. I asked why a grad student. "The Park Service geologist we wanted turned us down," Sutherland said. "Dennis came recommended. He knows the terrain." I looked at the photo again. He was 24 and looked 24. He looked like someone who was hoping nobody asked him anything hard. "He knows what he's getting into," I said. "He knows it's a recovery operation. He knows there's a kidnapping involved. Does he know it might get loud?" Sutherland picked up his coffee. "He'll figure it out." Great. That was great. We drove up the same day. Sutherland had a rented Suburban, gray, which was a fine choice for not being noticed. Gail was already waiting in the hotel lobby when we came down. She had her EMS duty jacket on over a dark tee, med kit strapped to her thigh. She looked at my face, and she looked at Sutherland's face, and then she looked back at me with an expression she'd had a lot of practice giving me over the years. "Hey," I said. "Don't," she said. We got in the car. Zane Burns met us at a gas station off I-35, just south of Duluth. He had a pickup already loaded with dive equipment, tanks bungeed into the bed. He shook my hand with the kind of grip that comes from years of hauling gear rather than trying to prove anything. He said he'd heard it was cold water work. I said it was. He said good. He hated warm water diving and got back in his truck. I liked him immediately. Lewis Dennis was at a Caribou Coffee in Duluth, sitting at a corner table with a laptop open and a day pack the size of a small refrigerator propped against his chair. He stood up when we came in and knocked his coffee with his elbow and caught it before it went over. He said, "Mr. Tran?" And I told him Wayne was fine. And he nodded and immediately started telling me about Apostle Island sandstone formation ages. I let him go for about 45 seconds and then told him we could cover the terrain brief in the car. He nodded fast. "Right, yeah, sorry." We drove north on Highway 13 into Bayfield, an hour, give or take. Lewis talked geology from the back seat the whole way. Gail stared out the window at the tree line. Sutherland drove and didn't say much. I watched the road and thought about how this had been a perfectly normal Tuesday morning before a pen injector showed up. We staged the vehicles in a gravel lot behind a storage building near the ferry docks on the south end of Bayfield. Sutherland had a contact who'd cleared it. We'd launched from Myers Beach, which was about 12 miles south down the mainland. But we needed somewhere to hold equipment and coordinate before we moved. The lot worked. It smelled like brine and old rope. A rusted chain-link fence ran along the back edge. Nobody was around. It was mid-afternoon. We had maybe 4 hours before dusk, which was when Sutherland wanted to move. Zane started checking tanks. Louis spread a laminated shoreline map on the hood of the Suburban and started marking entry points with a dry erase marker. Gail sat on a wooden cable spool and ate half a granola bar without offering any to anyone, which was her way of processing situations she hadn't fully signed off on yet. Sutherland didn't ask where I was going when I walked away from the lot. He probably knew. The bait shop was 6 blocks up, maybe 7. I didn't count. The sign on the door said it closed at 5, but the door was unlocked at 4:43, and the bell above the frame made its small noise when I pushed in. The shop smelled like minnow tanks and coffee and cedar. Avery kept a wooden bowl of cedar chips near the register. She was behind the counter working in a ledger with a ballpoint pen, the old-fashioned kind of record-keeping she'd always done. She looked up. She looked at my face. She set the pen down. "Sit," she said. I sat on the stool by the counter. She went to the back and came out with 2 cups of coffee. Black for me. Something from a small bottle she kept on the shelf added to hers. She sat on her own stool and looked at me for a moment without saying anything. "You're going into the caves," she said. "Yeah." She turned her cup in her hands once. "I heard about the girl, the one with the camera." I said I wasn't surprised she'd heard. Things move fast in Bayfield, especially bad things. People around here notice. She looked out the front window at the street. A pickup went by slow. The caves have been wrong for a few weeks, before she went missing. She paused. Things wash up wrong. Birds act wrong. The water's been pushing back instead of pulling in. I drank my coffee and didn't say anything. "If you find something in there," she said, "something that looks like it was left on purpose, placed, arranged." She looked at me directly. "Leave it alone." I asked what kind of something. "You'll know it," she said. "It won't be natural to the cave, but it'll look right. It'll look like it belongs, like it was put there for a reason." She said the word offering carefully, like she was setting it down. "Leave it alone. Don't touch it. Don't move it. Don't take it." I said okay. She looked at me to see if I meant it. I must have looked like I did because she picked up her coffee again and didn't push further. "I'm not going to tell you not to go," she said. "You're going anyway." "Yeah," I said. She nodded. "Just come back." I finished my coffee, left the cup on the counter next to her ledger, walked back down through the early evening toward the lot where Sutherland was at the Suburban's open tailgate, checking through a gear bag. He looked up when I came around the corner of the storage building. "Ready?" he said. I thought about Avery's face when she'd set her pen down before I'd said a single word. The way she'd said offering. The way she'd looked out the window at nothing. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." The gear fit in 3 kayaks. Sutherland had rented them from a place in Cornucopia that didn't ask questions, which I figured meant he'd used them before. We loaded up in the parking lot off Myers Beach Road while the last of the daylight went pink over the tree line. Gail checked her med kit twice. Zane ran a hand over his tank valves and didn't say anything. Louis stood near the water, holding his pack straps and looking like he was doing math in his head that wasn't coming out right. Sutherland said radios off. No exceptions. I asked what we did if we needed extraction. He said we wouldn't need it. That was that. The lake was cold and flat and smelled like deep stone. Superior always smells like that near the caves. something old and mineral underneath the fresh water. We paddled out in a loose line, Sutherland leading, me second, then Gale, then Zane with his tank rigged across his hull. Lewis brought up the rear and kept his paddle strokes uneven, which I figured meant he was looking around instead of watching his line. The mainland sea caves aren't far from Myers Beach. Maybe a mile of open water, and then the sandstone cliffs start rising and the channels narrow and the sound changes. Everything echoes in there. Your own breathing sounds louder than it should. We hit the first arch at dusk. I could still see fine, but the light was going flat and red, turning the cave walls the color of old brick. Sutherland had a waterproof flashlight and turned it on without ceremony. That's when I smelled it, before I saw anything. Wet copper, strong, the kind of smell that means you're already past the point where you should have turned around. The body was wedged between two rock shelves about 8 feet in from the cave mouth. A man in a full wetsuit, face down, arms trapped behind him where the rocks had pinched together. I got close enough to see the back of his neck and what was left of his throat. It wasn't a fall. Falls tear things differently. There's nothing organized about them. Whatever had opened this man's throat had done it in strips, parallel, clean at the start and ragged at the end, like something had been trying to peel rather than cut, like it had needed to get through quickly and didn't particularly care about being neat. I backed my kayak out a foot and looked at Sutherland. He shined the light on the body for maybe 4 seconds, then moved the beam forward into the cave. "Keep going," he said. Gale came up beside me and looked. Her jaw tightened once. She didn't say anything. Then she followed Sutherland. I stayed another second. The wetsuit was a Bear brand, older model, the kind you could find at any dive shop from here to Duluth. No visible ID, no dive knife on the belt, which was wrong. Divers almost always carry one. Either someone had taken it, or he hadn't had time to reach it. I filed that away and paddled after the others. The caves go deep if you follow the right channels. We went maybe 40 meters in before the ceiling dropped and we had to duck. There's a ledge on the north wall of the main chamber, wide sandstone, dry enough to beach a kayak on and stand up. Sutherland pulled up on it first and swept his light around. The camera case was sitting on the ledge like someone had set it there deliberately. Black Pelican case, small, the kind a content creator would carry for a mirrorless or a GoPro. I'd seen enough of Christina Alvarez's gear from Sutherland's briefing photos to recognize the sticker on the lid, a small red maple leaf, slightly peeled at one corner. That was hers. I pulled up beside Sutherland and got out. Lewis was already there. He picked up the case before anyone said anything, and I let him, because he had steady hands, and his glasses meant he'd actually read the labels before touching things. He popped the latches and pulled out a small Sony waterproof action camera and held the power button down. Battery still had a charge. Barely. The last clip was 42 seconds long. I watched it over Lewis's shoulder. Christina Alvarez on screen, face tight, talking fast. She was somewhere dark with a small lamp behind her, sitting on what looked like a cot or a low bench. 2 figures at the edges of the frame, deliberately out of it. You could see their shoulders. One had a vest on. Fleece or canvas, hard to say. She was arguing. The audio kept cutting out, but I caught pieces. "I told you," you said. "Just let me..." And then a hard splash off camera. Not a small sound. Something heavy entering water from a height. Then the voice. I didn't know the language. Not Spanish, not French. Not any of the ones I'd picked up fragments of overseas. It wasn't panicked exactly. It was begging, but flat, almost rhythmic, like whoever was speaking was repeating something they'd memorized a long time ago. Then the clip ended. Lewis lowered the camera. Nobody said anything for a second. "Play it again," Sutherland said. Lewis played it again. Sutherland watched it with his arms crossed and his flashlight pointing at the ceiling. When it ended the second time, his face did something I couldn't quite name. Not relief exactly, but close. The opposite of worried. Like a number had come back the way he'd expected it to, and now he could stop wondering. I tucked that away. She was alive when that was recorded, Gail said. Timestamps 36 hours ago, Louis said. He was already checking the file data on the camera's menu. Sutherland nodded. Good. Let's move. We backed the kayaks out of the cave. Tight work. 3-point turns in black water with flashlights held low. Zane had to muscle his hull around twice because of the tank. The body was still there when we passed it going out. I didn't look long. About halfway back to open water, something hit the bottom of my kayak. Not a rock. Not a submerged log. The impact came from directly below, and it was deliberate. One hard push, straight up, the kind that makes a hull flex and your teeth click together. I felt it through the seat. Zane heard the sound and turned his head. I shook mine once and he faced forward. The smell was back. Same wet copper as near the body, but stronger now, and it was moving with us. I kept my paddle in the water and my strokes even. I thought about Avery's voice. An old thing. Something that hated fire. I had a flare gun in my tool bag under the bow hatch, and I was very aware of exactly how many strokes it would take me to get to it. Nothing else hit us. We came out into open water and the smell faded, and I breathed through my nose until it was just lake again. Nobody talked about it. We crossed to Sand Island in the dark. About 40 minutes of paddling. Zane had his sonar fish finder running on his hull, and I watched his face instead of the water. He checked the screen twice, fast, then stared straight ahead and didn't check it again. I didn't ask. We beached on the south side and pulled the kayaks above the waterline. The island's got a trail system that runs up from the beach into the trees and then north toward the lighthouse. We'd been on the island maybe 10 minutes, gear on our backs, Louis reading a topo on his phone, when I saw the stones. Off the main trail, about 15 feet into the trees, a small clearing, a ring of red granite stones arranged in a circle about 4 feet across. Stacked carefully, not tossed together or kicked into place. The kind of careful that takes time and means something to whoever did it. I knew the island's geology, sandstone and basalt. Red granite from the mainland didn't belong here. Somebody had brought these in and arranged them on purpose. In the center of the ring, sitting flat on the top stone, was a silver necklace charm, small, crescent shape, clean and dry, which made no sense given how damp everything else was. I'd seen it in the briefing photos, around Christina Alvarez's neck, in her last YouTube thumbnail, the one Sutherland had printed out and handed around the hotel suite. Gail came up beside me and reached for it. I grabbed her wrist. She looked at me. I looked at the stones and then back at her. She pulled her hand back slowly. I wasn't going to take it, she said. Okay, I said. I hadn't been sure about that. I'd stopped her before I'd finished the thought. I looked at the stones again. At the charm sitting exactly centered on the flat top stone. Avery had said I'd know it when I saw it, that it would look like it belonged, that it would look placed. She'd been right about that. The whole thing looked intentional in a way that made my shoulders want to come up. Leave it alone. I stepped back from the ring. 2 seconds later, 5 men walked out of the trees. They were spread wide, which meant they'd planned it. Positioned before we arrived. 1 had a shotgun, 2 had hunting rifles, bolt action by the look of them. The other 2 had handguns out at their sides. They were dressed for the island, layered, dark colors, boots, and they moved like they knew every root and low branch in this particular clearing. Their leader stepped forward 1 pace and stopped. Ball cap, fleece vest, narrow face, permanent squint from years of sun off water. Tanned in the way guides get tanned, not tourist weekend tanned. A thin white scar across his left knuckles that I hadn't noticed before because I'd only ever seen him from across a fuel dock. Freddie Sullivan. He ran kayak and hiking tours out of Bayfield for the Apostle Islands outfitter. Had a website with a lot of smiling photos, 5-star reviews. He'd nodded at me once across the marina, and I'd nodded back, and that had been our whole relationship up to that point. He was looking at me now like we were catching up. "Hey, Wayne," he said. Easy, conversational. "You're usually done with the slips by 4. That part bugged me a little. "Took my time today," I said. He nodded like that was perfectly reasonable. Then he looked at all 5 of us in turn, unhurried, and laid out his terms. Jonathan Alvarez had money. He had Christina Alvarez. He wanted a number moved quietly. No Coast Guard involvement, no press. The whole thing could be wrapped up by morning. He said it the way someone describes a straightforward transaction, like we'd all eventually agree it was the sensible option. While he talked, I watched his eyes. He kept sliding them left, towards Sutherland specifically. Not toward me, not toward Zane's tank or the gear bags. Toward Sutherland, like he was watching for something. A nod, a signal, some agreed-upon cue. Sutherland had his hands up slightly. Not all the way, just the first gesture of someone about to negotiate. He was nodding a little, reasonable, patient, making Sullivan feel like the conversation had somewhere to go. Then he shot him. 1 round, low, and Sullivan went down hard. And then everyone was moving at once. The first 3 seconds were just noise. Somebody yelled, somebody fired back, and I dropped low and moved right because that's what my body does when things go loud. Zane was already on 1 knee. I thought he'd tripped. Then I saw the wet dark spreading through the lower leg of his cargo pants and understood he hadn't tripped at all. "Calf," he said. Not a scream, just a status update. Gail was already moving toward him. That's the thing about Gail. She doesn't decide to help someone. She's just already there. I had the flare gun out. It was the only thing I'd pulled from the tool bag before we launched, which probably says something about how I thought this night might go. Single shot, marine rescue flare, the kind that burns orange and doesn't care what it touches. There was a guy moving through the trees to my left, trying to get a better angle, and I swung and fired without thinking about it much. He caught it in the shoulder. That part I'll leave there. It did what it does. He went down loud, and then he wasn't. The other 3 who were still standing looked at each other, and then at the tree line, and made a fast group decision. They ran. Took maybe 4 seconds total. Louis was standing about 8 feet from me with a pistol I hadn't known he had, pointed at a body on the ground near the tree line. His glasses were crooked. He was breathing too fast. "Did I?" he started. "Yeah," I said. "You did." He lowered the gun slow. Didn't say anything else. I didn't either. There wasn't much to say about it. Sutherland was already checking Sullivan's pockets. Professional, quick like this had always been part of the plan. Maybe it had. Gail had Zane's pant leg rolled up and was pressing a field dressing against the calf wound with both hands. The bleeding was bad, but not the kind that ends things. "Through and through," she said. "He can walk." "Wonderful," Zane said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. I stood there a moment in the quiet that follows gunfire. 5 armed guys had shown up knowing my name and my work schedule. Their leader had kept watching Sutherland like he was waiting for a signal, and Sutherland had shot him the moment the negotiation gave him a clean opening. I figured the criminal part of this was basically wrapped up. Then I looked at the water. The flare had burned out over the lake, orange arc dropping into the dark. But something out there had answered it. I noticed the shape before I understood what I was looking at. A head, big, black the way deep water is black. It rose slow and kept rising, and there were things branching off the top of it, irregular, the way antlers look when they've been submerged a long time. Its eyes caught the last of the flare light and threw it back green. I'm not going to say I wasn't scared. I was. But there's a kind of scared that just clears you out and makes room for thinking, and that's the one I got. It stopped at the waterline, right at it, stayed there and watched. I looked at the stone ring, red granite. Louis had said it was wrong for the island's geology. It had been brought here deliberately, placed in a circle, and Christina's necklace had been set on top of it clean and dry. And now there was something massive and old at the edge of the water that would not cross the shoreline. Not couldn't, wouldn't. Like it knew the line was there. Avery York had told me once, over her bad coffee in the bait shop, that there were things in Lake Superior that remembered when the water was younger. She'd said leave offerings alone. She'd said if you see a ring of stones that doesn't belong, don't touch what's on it. I hadn't laughed that time. I'd nodded and changed the subject. I should have asked more questions. We moved now. Sutherland was beside me, looking at the water, but he didn't look like a man seeing something impossible. He looked like a man checking a variable. Grab the necklace, break the ring. We draw it toward the net gun and take it from there. Take it, Gail said. Her head had come up from Zane's leg. What does that mean? Contain it. Transport it. There are buyers. You brought a net gun, she said. To Lake Superior. Modified system. Pneumatic. It's been tested. Colin. She stood up. Her hands still had blood on them from Zane's calf. That thing is the size of a boat. Smaller specimens have been secured before. Specimens. She said the word back to him like she was identifying something. And Christina? She's still out there somewhere. Christina was always a secondary concern. That landed different than anything else he'd said all night. I looked at him. He met my eyes and didn't flinch. The ring, he said, now, before it goes back under. Lewis, I said. Louis was crouched near the edge of the clearing, not looking at the water. He was looking at the ground, at the sand where the tree line started. He had his phone out, flashlight aimed low. There are prints, he said. Fresh ones, smaller than any of the guys who were just here. He looked up, glasses still crooked. Like significantly smaller. I walked over and looked. He was right, narrow, pressed deep at the toes like someone had been moving fast. Heading north along the tree line toward the far end of the island. Sutherland started to say something. I was already moving. Wayne. That was Gail. Stay with Zane, I said. Lewis with me. The ring, Sutherland said, louder. I didn't answer. I knew the island layout roughly from ferry maps I'd looked at 3 days earlier. The lighthouse was on the north end, automated since the 80s, supposedly unoccupied. The footprints were going north. That was enough. Lewis caught up to me in about 10 steps. We went through the trees without lights, me navigating by water sound, and what little sky came through the canopy. Louis stayed close and didn't talk, which I appreciated. The lighthouse was a white column above the tree line, taller than I'd expected. The keeper's quarters beside it had boarded windows. The door had a padlock, listed on the park service signage we'd passed coming in. The padlock was hanging open. The door swung inward when I pushed it. We moved through the keeper's quarters, empty, smelling like mildew and old wood, and up the spiral staircase to the lantern room. The glass panels were filmed with grime. From up there, I could see the offshore shape still sitting at the waterline, still watching. I could see Sutherland and Gail in the clearing, still arguing, small from this distance. I stopped looking at all of that because there was a square hole in the floor, not a hatch, not original architecture. Someone had cut it. The edges were clean, done with a saw, and there was an aluminum ladder bolted to the concrete, dropping straight into the dark below. I could hear something from down there. Low, mechanical. Generator. Louis looked at me. I looked at the hole. I went down first. The tunnel was concrete, low-ceilinged, and smelled like damp rock and exhaust fumes. The generator was a Honda unit, the kind from any hardware store, running on a fuel can beside it. It was powering 2 work lights strung on a single orange extension cord along the ceiling. The light was harsh and uneven. Christina Alvarez was in a camp chair in the middle of it, wrists zip-tied to the armrests, ankles tied to the legs. She had a silver space blanket over her shoulders that hadn't done much. Her hair was tangled, and there was a cut above her left eyebrow, dried brown at the edges. She was shaking, but her eyes were open and tracking. "Hey," I said. She blinked. "Are you—" Her voice was wrecked, the kind from hours of not talking. "Are you here to get me out?" "Yeah," I said. She let out a breath, long and ragged, the kind you'd been holding for a while. Lewis dropped down the ladder behind me and made a sound when he saw her, somewhere between relief and distress. I was already moving toward the chair. The man in the Coast Guard coveralls came out of the dark at the far end of the tunnel. I didn't see him until I was halfway to Christina's chair. He had a rifle up. Not a real rifle, one of those tranquilizer units. The kind with a scope and a CO2 mechanism. He was big, square-faced, and he didn't look particularly worried about any of us. "Stop there," he said. I stopped. Behind me, the ladder rattled again. Sutherland came down last. He took his time. When he hit the floor, he looked around like he was checking into a hotel room he'd booked in advance. "Everyone relax," he said. Gail was already at Christina's left side, fingers working the zip tie on her wrist. She didn't stop when Sutherland said that. She kept going, which was very Gail. "Sutherland," I kept my voice flat. "What's this?" He told me straight, which I hadn't expected. Usually people in his position drag it out. He just said it. Christina Alvarez had never been the point. She was bait. A missing streamer with a public profile, a worried father, and a known last location near the caves. She'd been placed here, not hidden here, placed near a thing that came out of the water and couldn't cross the stone boundary. The plan was to use the disruption from the firefight, the noise and the movement and the lights, to drive it toward the lighthouse tunnel. The tunnel had an opening at the back end that went below the waterline. Sutherland had a capture rig in a crate at the far wall I hadn't looked at yet. Some kind of pressurized net system, military surplus, the kind used for big game tagging. Jonathan Alvarez's money. Not the point. Someone else was paying. He didn't say who. I stood there for a second. "You drugged me and drove me to St. Paul for a fishing trip," I said. Sutherland almost smiled. "You wouldn't have come otherwise." "No." Gail got the second wrist free and moved to the ankles. The big guy with the tranquilizer rifle, Tim Sims, I found out later, kept the barrel pointed roughly at the middle of our group. Not at anyone specific, just at the space we occupied. He had flat gray eyes and he looked like he'd been doing boring jobs for a long time. And this was another one. I looked at Sutherland. He was moving toward the crate. That was when I decided I was done waiting. I crossed the distance fast. He heard me and turned, but not fast enough. I got a hand on the capture rig before he did, and we went into the wall together. The crate knocked over. He caught me with an elbow to the jaw that rattled something loose in my back teeth. I felt that. I didn't stop. Sims fired. The compressed pop of the CO2 mechanism. I didn't feel anything. Thought for half a second he'd missed completely. Then Zane made a sound. Not a yell. More like a surprised grunt. The kind you make when something happens to your body that your brain hasn't caught up with yet. I looked back. The dart was in his left shoulder. Yellow flights. And he was already going sideways. He grabbed at the tunnel wall. His hand slid down the concrete and he stumbled backward. 3 steps. 4. And then there was no more floor behind him. He went into the pit. I hadn't registered there was a pit. Square opening in the floor at the back end of the tunnel, ringed in old concrete. Water sitting black and flat inside it. Maybe 4 feet across. He went in feet first, and then he was gone. The water closed over him and barely moved. Nobody said anything for about a second. Then the water moved a lot. Something came up that was not Zane. It came up fast, and it was big. and the word that kept not quite landing in my head was wrong. Just wrong. Black, wet, massive. The head was longer than a man's torso, and it had these branch-like protrusions coming off the crown. Not antlers exactly, more like something that had grown in the dark without a plan. Its eyes caught the work light and reflected green, the same color as old copper. The neck filled most of the tunnel width when it rose. Sutherland went for the capture rig on the floor. He actually went for it. I want to be clear about that. He hit the ground and grabbed it and started trying to arm the net mechanism, which told me everything I needed to know about how long he'd been thinking about this moment versus how fast it was actually moving. The creature's head swung toward him, not slow about it. I grabbed Christina's arm. Gail had her ankles free. I didn't look at what happened to Sutherland. I heard it. There was a sound like a wet branch coming apart, and then a louder sound, and then nothing from Sutherland at all. "Ladder," I said. Christina got up on her own, unsteady but moving. I had my pack off in 2 seconds. The red granite stones, I'd pocketed them from the ring on Sand Island just in case, no real reason, just habit, were at the bottom under a water bottle and a first aid kit. I got them out. 5 of them, irregular shapes, cold and heavy. I dropped them into the pit, all 5, one at a time, fast. Then I kicked the overturned crate in after them. I don't know why I thought it would work. Avery York's voice was in my head saying, "Leave anything that looks like an offering alone," and I'd taken that to mean don't touch it. But maybe she'd meant it the other way. Maybe it was about returning things to where they came from. The stones hit the water. The grinding sound started almost immediately, low and slow, like 2 millstones turning, or like something settling back into a place it recognized. The creature's head dropped, not fast, gradual. The way a tide goes out. I didn't watch the rest. I was already at the ladder. Up top, Louis was there. He had Christina's arm before she cleared the top rung and pulled her the rest of the way onto the lighthouse floor. She sat down hard on the stone and put her hands over her face. Not crying, just done. Gail came up after. She went straight to Zane's pack, sitting by the ladder where he'd left it before climbing down. She knelt beside it, didn't open it, just put one hand on the top and stayed there for a moment. That was it. That was all she did. Below, the grinding stopped. The pit went quiet. The generator was still running. The Honda unit doesn't care about anything. And the work lights were still on, and the extension cord was still strung along the ceiling. Everything the same. One fewer person. I sat down on the floor next to the ladder opening and looked at the ceiling. Louis said something. I didn't catch it. Christina said something back, quieter. Gail stood up and picked up her medkit. Nobody talked about Zane. Not right then. I had the radio in my hand before I thought about it. Coast Guard Channel 16, standard hailing frequency. I'd used it maybe 3 times in 2 years at the Marina, mostly to report debris in the shipping lane. The dispatcher picked up on the second call. I gave her the location, Sand Island Lighthouse, and told her we had an armed kidnapping victim, one confirmed fatality in a tunnel below the structure, and a deceased military contractor. I said the victim needed a medical evacuation. I kept it short. She asked me to repeat the contractor part. I did. She told me to stay on the line. I set the radio down and went to check on Christina. She was still against the wall near the ladder. Louis had found a thermal blanket somewhere, the foil kind, and had it around her shoulders. She was looking at the floor. Her hair was matted on one side, and there was a bruise along her jaw I hadn't noticed in the tunnel. She looked up when I came over. "Is it done?" she said. "Yeah," I said. "They're coming." She nodded and looked back at the floor. Gail had moved to the window and was watching the water. I stood near her for a minute. The lake was flat, black, nothing on it. Whatever had been out there wasn't showing itself anymore. Maybe it knew the fire was out. Maybe it just didn't care. Zane's pack has a first aid kit, Gail said. I already pulled it. Okay, I said. She'd already dressed the cut on her forearm I didn't know she had. She worked fast. She always worked fast. That was the thing about Gail. She was already 3 steps ahead before you knew there was a problem. I didn't say anything about that. There wasn't anything to say. The Coast Guard boats came in 41 minutes. 2 of them. A small rescue vessel and a larger response boat with a paramedic team. They beached near the lighthouse and came up with a stretcher before I'd finished waving them in. One of them asked who was in charge. I said it was a complicated question. He didn't think that was funny. Fair enough. They took Christina out first. She kept saying she could walk. She could. She walked to the stretcher under her own power, and then sat down on it and let them strap her in. She looked back at the lighthouse once before they carried her down toward the boats. I don't know what she was looking at. The helicopter came out of Duluth. Twin Cities base, I think. The crew had Minnesota air patches. They landed in the clearing behind the lighthouse, the same clearing where the stone ring had been. Louis and I had kicked the stones apart at some point. I don't remember exactly when. I just remember doing it. The red granite loose in the grass, the ring gone. They loaded Christina and lifted off. That was the last I saw of her that night. Tim Sims was still unconscious in the tunnel when the Coast Guard team went down to clear it. The trank dart had hit him high on the shoulder and he'd gone down hard. They got him on a backboard and up the ladder without much trouble. He woke up in federal custody. I heard later he didn't say much. That tracked. Sutherland's body was never recovered. The dive team searched the pit and the connected cave system for 3 days. They found his capture device, 1 boot, and what I was told was a length of web gear. Nothing else. They closed the search on day 4. I signed a statement at the Bayfield County Sheriff's Office that said I'd witnessed him fall into a submerged cave system and did not see him surface. That was technically accurate. Jonathan Alvarez flew into Duluth the morning after Christina was admitted. He was at St. Luke's when she woke up. I know because a Pinkerton liaison called me from the hospital lobby and asked if I wanted to speak to Mr. Alvarez directly. I said no. The liaison called back 2 hours later and said Mr. Alvarez appreciated my service and that accounting would be in touch. Accounting was never in touch. Sutherland's fee, the $1 million, the whole pitch, was tied to a contract that technically didn't exist because the man who'd written it was gone and the shell company he'd invoiced it through had dissolved within 48 hours. I looked into it for about a day. Then I stopped. I'm not a lawyer, and I wasn't going to become one. I drove back to Bayfield on a Tuesday, 3 days after the lighthouse. Parked in the same spot behind the Marina office, next to the dumpster that smells like fish, no matter what season it is. Got my scraper out of the truck bed and went to work on Slip 14, which had a serious algae situation I'd been meaning to get back to. Nobody said anything. The dock manager, a guy named Pete, who communicates mostly through grunts, nodded at me when I walked past. Tourist boats were running. A family on a rented pontoon went by too fast near the no-wake buoys. Normal day. I went to Avery's at lunch. Brought the coffee, which was my end of the arrangement. She had a fishing trade magazine on the counter, the kind with lure ads on every other page. She poured herself a cup without looking up. "You're still in one piece," she said. "Most of it," I said. She looked at me then. Just looked. She has a way of doing that where you feel like she's counting something. "The caves?" she said. "Yeah. And the other thing?" I thought about the black head coming up out of the pit, the antler shapes, the green in its eyes. Sutherland going up and then not coming back down. "Yeah," I said. She nodded like I'd confirmed a weather report, picked up her magazine. I drank my coffee. She told me a story that day about something the old people called Mishibiji, a creature that lived under the ice and hated fire and had been patient since before anyone had a word for patient. She told it the same way she told all her stories, unhurried. Like there was no particular reason to rush toward the end. I'd heard some version of it before. I used to think it was a good story, the kind that made you feel like a place had character. I didn't laugh this time. I finished my coffee and washed the cup in her sink and put it back on the hook where it lived. She was still reading. "Don't go past the caves," she said. "I know," I said. "Not because of the creature," she said, "just because." I didn't ask her what that meant. I figured I already knew. I went back to the dock and scraped algae until my arm was sore, and then I kept going. The lake was flat and cold and very big. It always had been. The difference was, I used to be able to forget that. I still showed up every morning, still scraped the slips and moved the fuel hoses and pointed tourists toward the parking. The monotony held, same as it always did. That part hadn't changed. But when Avery told her stories now, I listened differently. Not like someone hearing a good yarn. More like someone checking a map they wish they didn't need. The things under the ice were real. They were close. And they'd been patient a lot longer than I'd been anything. That was the part that stayed with me.